We believe that the best way to learn the Smarter Balanced rubric and what it evaluates is to get some practice with hand-scoring sample student responses. But before you start, we'll walk you through the process of gathering evidence and scoring. The goals of this video are to orient you to a process for reading a student full-write response, tagging evidence within that response, and using that evidence to make scoring decisions. There isn't a single best approach to going through this process, but we believe the most important habit of mind that it supports is evidence-based scoring. To fully benefit from viewing this video, you'll need the following materials: the Grade 4 Practice Performance Task, Animals and Their Surroundings, from the Smarter Balanced Practice Test Online portal, the Smarter Balanced rubric for informational writing in grades 3 through 5, which is available with this video, and the student sample, Animals and Their Surroundings, Sample A. Please pause the video and download these materials. Skim the Practice Performance Task and the Informational Writing rubric. The first step in the scoring process is to review the full-write task prompt. It's a good idea to go back and quickly remind yourself of what the task prompt requested of students. In this video, we'll review a student sample from the 4th grade informational writing task, Animals and Their Surroundings. Students are asked to produce a multi-paragraph informational essay about animals and their surroundings. Then, they are directed to use more than one source of the 3 that are provided to develop a main idea about animals and their surroundings. Step 2 in the scoring process is to quickly review the relevant scoring rubric to remind yourself of the scoring dimensions to keep in mind as you read the student sample. Finally, it's time to individually read and score the student sample. At this point, pause the video, find the student sample and the scoring rubric. Please review the rubric, then read the sample, keeping the rubric criteria in mind. Now that you've had a chance to read through the sample, I'll walk you through the process that we recommend when reading, gathering evidence, and scoring a student sample. You should have available 3 highlighting markers of different colors. It doesn't really matter what colors you use, but in this demo, we'll use yellow for organization and purpose, green for evidence and elaboration, and blue for conventions. Using these highlighting tools, I'll tag evidence related to each scoring dimension while reading the student essay. I've broken down the process to focus on one dimension at a time, but you could tag pieces of evidence related to any of the scoring dimensions as you notice them while moving through the essay. First, as I walk through this student essay, I'll look for a clear purpose, a main idea. In the first paragraph, the student introduces the main idea of the essay, that animals live in all kinds of habitats, and that most of the time animals have to change to fit their surroundings. Let's take a look at the final paragraph. Uh-oh, the student doesn't really seem to have a conclusion for the entire essay, except for an exclamation point at the end of the last sentence. But as I go through the body paragraphs, I notice that in the second paragraph, the main idea is fairly evident, that animals live in all kinds of habitats, and the idea that sometimes animals change to fit their surroundings. The third and final paragraphs also extend the main idea that animals live in different habitats by discussing water and forest habitats. The third paragraph discusses another way that an animal, in this case the beaver, behaves to interact with its environment. I think I've gathered enough evidence related to the essay's purpose, so I'm going to score that part of the rubric now. Using my yellow highlighter, I've selected the Level 3 score for the first indicator of the Organization and Purpose rubric. I think the main idea is clear and is maintained in each succeeding paragraph. There's an adequate introduction with a clear main idea, but the conclusion is missing, so I've highlighted the Level 3 indicator for introduction, but the Level 1 indicator for conclusion. Let's move to organization. Following a clear introduction, The essay begins each of the next 3 paragraphs with a new example of an animal habitat: the desert, water, and forests. The essay also uses a number of internal transition words within paragraphs to connect ideas between sentences. For example, also, so, even, and these. I've got enough evidence now to score the essay's organization. For transitional strategies, I've highlighted the Level 3 indicator, adequate use of transitional strategies with some variety to clarify the relationships between and among ideas. I also think that the structure of the essay, with a clear introduction and 3 paragraphs that build on that introduction, provides an adequate progression of ideas from beginning to end. Overall, the evidence that we've tagged related to this dimension suggests that a score of 3 is most appropriate. The summative comments at the top of Level 3 capture the essay's quality well. There is an evident organizational structure. There are minor flaws, in this case an absent conclusion, which affects the essay's sense of completeness, but not the overall coherence. The organization is sustained, and the response is generally focused. Let's move on to looking at the essay through the lens of evidence and elaboration. The evidence and elaboration dimension evaluates how well the essay supports the main idea. In this case, the student's introduction provides the main idea. Animals live in all kinds of habitats. The question is, does the essay present limited, adequate, or thorough evidence that supports this main idea? I've used my green highlighter to tag evidence for this dimension. In the first paragraph, we see that the essay includes evidence from source number 1. It provides an example, the penguin, of how an animal changes to fit its surroundings. It huddles close together with other penguins to stay warm. The student cites the source simply and adequately. The second paragraph also includes evidence from source number 1, though it is not cited. The essay provides details about the desert habitat. The day is a lot hotter than the night, and elaborates that animals keep cool by digging burrows, drinking water in a cactus, and coming out only at night. These details definitely support the main idea that there are different kinds of habitats, cold and hot, and that animals behave in ways that let them fit their surroundings. In paragraphs 3 and 4, we learn about 2 other kinds of habitats, water and forests. In paragraph 3, the essay uses information from source number 2 to elaborate on how beavers interact with their environment to create their own habitats. In paragraph 4, the essay includes details from source number 3 that describe the kind of habitat that trees provide to animals like squirrels and birds. This last paragraph is the weakest in that it doesn't really describe how animals change to fit the environment, but it certainly provides another example of an animal habitat. So let's score the evidence and elaboration dimension now that we have tagged some evidence. I've highlighted the Level 3 indicator for adequate evidence is integrated and relevant. I don't think the evidence is quite comprehensive, the Level 4 requirement, and remains at the general level. When using information from sources, the essay usually cites the source, with the exception of paragraph 2. Also, I've highlighted that the essay has adequate use of some elaborative techniques. This student definitely includes multiple examples of different animal habitats, sometimes describes specific animals that live in those habitats, and how animals behave or interact with their environments. Let's step back for a moment and discuss the question, what are elaborative techniques? Smarter Balance defines elaboration as the process of developing ideas by providing supporting details. These details may take the form of facts, definitions, examples, including personal anecdotes, descriptions, quotations, and explanations. In the sample we reviewed, we saw the use of examples of habitats and animals that live in them, descriptions, and facts. Now, what about vocabulary and style? The vocabulary is generally appropriate for the audience and purpose. For example, They also huddle close together to stay warm, and a generally appropriate style is evident. For example, in the desert, many animals dig burrows to keep cool. They also keep cool by drinking the water in a cactus. The essay uses a mix of precise and general language. For example, these lakes and ponds are homes to beavers, fish, and all kinds of great animals. In paragraphs 3 and 4, there is a reliance on the word great, which is repeated a number of times. But overall, the style and vocabulary are adequate. So, moving back to the rubric, I've highlighted the Level 3 indicator for generally appropriate vocabulary and style for audience and purpose. Overall, the evidence we collected warrants a score of 3 for this dimension. The elaboration and use of source materials is adequate. The ideas are adequately developed, and the response includes a mix of precise and more general language. Finally, let's score the conventions dimension. I've used my blue highlighter to tag evidence for this dimension. Overall, I find that the essay includes few errors in language conventions. Mostly they are spelling errors, desert, borrows, then, and a few word usage errors that appear to be typos rather than errors in usage. They, it. Overall, the evidence points to a score of 2 for conventions, the maximum score. There are no evident errors in punctuation, capitalization, and grammar usage, and very few errors in spelling. The ratio of errors to the total volume of writing is low. The student demonstrates a solid command of conventions for 4th grade. Now let's review the steps for reading, collecting evidence, and scoring. We start by reviewing the task prompt, reviewing the scoring rubric, and reading the student's sample with the scoring dimensions in mind. The next step is to tag or highlight evidence in the sample that is relevant for scoring particular dimensions of the rubric. Then, you highlight the level indicators in the rubric that match the evidence that you've noted. Finally, you select a score that best represents the preponderance of evidence for the focus of the dimension. The sample that we scored in this demo was not necessarily a typical sample, in that it was selected to be a clear Level 3 anchor for 4th grade informational writing. It's typical to find more variation in the scores across indicators within a single scoring dimension. In this example, we see that the essay has varied strengths and weaknesses within the same scoring dimension. Scoring this dimension is not so neat and simple, is it? In this case, how would you select an overall score for evidence and elaboration? We use a principle called the preponderance of evidence to make the scoring decision. We look at the strength of the evidence, and we focus on what this dimension is truly about based on the summative comments at the top of each column. This dimension is about providing elaboration of the main idea and use of source material to develop that main idea. Vocabulary and style are secondary, and citing sources is not mentioned. The preponderance of evidence suggests that for this sample, a Level 3 score should be selected. Despite weaknesses in vocabulary and style and lack of citations, the use of evidence and source materials, as well as elaborative techniques, outweigh those weaknesses to arrive at an overall score of 3. We don't average across the indicators to arrive at a score of 2. Instead, we select the score that best represents the characteristics of writing that are assessed in this dimension. This concludes the video on gathering evidence and scoring using the Smarter Balanced Full Write rubrics.